Uh,
Welcome to the ROI channel where we're shooting the Maverick podcast today. We've got one of the original Mavericks, let's be honest. Bowtied Mara's back on the channel. Disclaimer, nothing we say is advice. Free-flowing conversation between two lads. We're going to touch on crypto, South America in general, particularly Argentine real estate. And we're going to talk about what is going on in Brazil. Our brethren, the Bowtides, anonymous profiles are being attacked with the removal of Twitter. Lula has gone full Chavez, it seems. Or Maduro is saying that Christmas is now in October. So you can have Christmas in July, October, but not in December. Mara, what is
yeah,
going on in
he's
the world? What's going on in the Southern Cone, mate?
it's basically the good old fashioned Latin American lifestyle that is coming back. Basically we're the odd ones out right now because we're just way too libertarian and an open economy, etc. Although there's still a lot to be done because there's still a lot of restrictions not lifted yet. But yeah, Lula, it looks like he came back with a vengeance because he basically lift off in 2003 with his first government, lifted off the whole commodity cycle, and it did a kind of AMLO, what AMLO's doing in Mexico. Nestor Kirchner was similar. They sort of laid the groundwork for all the social benefits and plans, etc. And then afterwards, another socialist can really nuke it into the ground, which was in Argentina's case, Cristina. And now we'll have to see what happens with the new president in Mexico. Of course, in Brazil, everything went a little bit different. He had two terms. Then during Dilma, which was also president of his party, everything started to go south. The economy just kind of went into a standstill, and the whole corruption scandal of Lava Jato, the car wash scandal, came out, which was billions and billions of dollars through
So let's
construction
unpack that.
corruption,
Let's
etc.
unpack
Yeah,
that for people that are not as familiar, because you originally landed in Brazil and then
yeah.
found your way to Argentina. Lava Jato was what, 2014? Explain to people just how big of a deal that was.
So basically, that was one of the biggest corruption scandals in Latin America, in history. I can't really recall how many billions it was, but it was definitely close to the IPF scandal that came out later. Similar. And yeah, the thing is that a lot of high level people were prosecuted, but in the end, the politicians didn't really have to face up for anything they did. So Lula did go to jail for a little while, but it was they had a really hard time convicting him for anything very particular. So it also from Lula's standpoint or his followers, it was kind of like a political prosecution that they just wanted to get rid of him. And I think in the
Yeah, the
end,
judge
they,
was the judge was a friend of Jair Bolsonaro or something like this.
yeah, I think it was in the, at least in the opposing bloc that also shoved Temer forward, which was basically the guy that got rid of Dilma because Dilma didn't finish her term. And she was basically removed, and then Temer was inserted for a year or so before the elections, and then Bolsonaro won. So that was kind of messy, not really. Um, it was kind of the opposite situation what we have now in Venezuela, where you would see, okay, this is kind of like a maybe a right wing kind of insertion to get them out of power. But at the same time, the corruption scandal was there, so it was there were grounds for that, but it was not cleanly done. So it was also kind of corrupt, and it was all kind of messy. And then they did indict him for, I think it was a remodeling of his home or a home he bought, and he couldn't justify the funds or whatever. But they only got him for like 150K, and in the end, he served some time, but then they had to revert it, and it wasn't final or whatever because they couldn't even prove that. So then he set out the Bolsonaro presidency, which Bolsonaro had a really hard time getting into the power structure of the country. He couldn't really get uniformity in government, and he did do a lot of really positive fiscal things, and got the deficit away, etc., which Lula is now nuking into the ground very quickly. And then basically, it was a very close call, and I still think I'm kind of on the fence of what really happened during that election. Same with the U.S. election, where it was just too close to call, and there were a lot of it was electronic voting, and there were a lot of accounts from Argentina also that were following the results very closely, and there was just like a lot of inconsistencies that they were pointing out, and these are the same.
How secure is this electronic voting thing? Because a lot of people say, "Oh, look, if the US had had electronic or blockchain voting system, you wouldn't have all this mail voter fraud and all this sort of thing." What's
blockchain voting would be one thing, because then you could actually track it down, like who voted. It could still be anonymous, but at least you could. There's no tampering with how many votes, etc. It would be a lot more traceable. But electronic voting, Holland had it for a while, and they actually got rid of it again and went back to paper because it is less transparent, and that's just the case. And there's a lot of studies done around electronic voting, and it's just way easier to tamper with, and it's just less transparent for the population as well. And there were a lot of examples in Brazil of things that just weren't really didn't really look kosher, so to say. And those were the same accounts signaling those kind of things were the accounts that Moraes, the judge, wanted to expel from Twitter, basically, and they actually blocked a few Argentine accounts like La Derecha Diario. In Brazil, you couldn't see those accounts during a year or so until Elon took over, and then he sort of banned everything like that. And he said, no, that's just bullshit. We're not going to ban accounts that didn't do anything illegal. And that's what the whole thing with the Judge Moraes is about, that Elon doesn't want to just randomly ban Twitter accounts, because he even wanted to ban like another senator's account or whatever. And it's just kind of, very random. It's like, I don't like this guy, just ban him from Twitter.
You mean what they did to Donald Trump?
Yeah, and this
saying.
He's taking it to the next level, and he's trying to get Musk on a technicality where he should have an office or representative in Brazil if he wants to offer services there. Now, the thing is, the internet has millions of websites, and none of them, or a few of them, have representatives in Brazil. So it's kind of curious, also not really hard ground to stand on, etc. So I'm leaning more towards Musk and free speech, and I think this Moraes guy is just totally out of bounds and kind of like a little dictator, trying to censor who he doesn't like. And of course, he's an extension of Lula's party, and they all think this is fine. But it basically started, that whole thing started with the doubts about the election, because it was really 50.1% or something. It was just too close to call. And that's why you had this revolt at the Congress on the day after, or the same day.
Yeah,
and
indeed.
they arrested a bunch of people, sort of like January 6th in the US. All super long sentences, and they just went, oh, they're threatening democracy. And so it's really like that's kind of the narrative. So it's kind of scary that they're actually able to just censor that for so many people, and
that
just
means
pull it out of the air.
Yeah. So state of play currently is that Elon has removed X from Brazil, and so we're missing our brethren, the bow-tied white bat, always with some interesting commentary on Twitter. So I wondered why I hadn't heard from him for a while, and that must be why.
Well, yeah, I think he's not popping up for some reason, but Bowtied Brazil is like, nah, fuck it, I'm gonna tweet anyway. So he's probably using a VPN. No, but Elon didn't pull X. Like they just
Okay.
blocked the IP or the DNS records from Brazil. So with the Brazilian IP, if you're in Brazil, you cannot access the site or the domain,
And
basically.
isn't there some ridiculous fine if you get caught in Brazil using a VPN?
Yeah, I think it's like $8,000 per hour or something that you're still using it, which is why it's very cool that some politicians are just like, "Fuck this, I'm gonna tweet anyway," and
Wow.
and they have their first name and last name, and they're just like, "No, we're gonna do it anyway," which is kind of cool.
Maybe I need a bow-tied
Yeah,
maverick.
yeah.
Now I've been digging in here.
But
Operação
wait,
Lava
just
Jato.
yeah, okay,
Get a load of this. So misappropriated Petrobras funds estimated, I'll quote US dollars, 2.5 billion. And remember, this was 10 years ago.
yeah.
Reimburse reimbursement requested by Petrobras, 9 billion. So that's a little different. And then the recovered funds, a whole 912 million have been recovered. And I don't think they're going
Mm.
to be adding to that anytime soon. So
No.
there you
Yeah,
go.
so that was basically they were using Petrobras as a vehicle together with some big construction companies as well to launder a bunch of money for politicians and the like. There was a really cool Netflix
I saw that. Yeah.
series about that, yeah, from Brazil, which kind of showed the start of the investigation.
And is it true, as it shown in the series, where they're laundering billions and billions from these state operated enterprises, these behemoths? This
Mhm.
dude just in the upstairs of office of his car wash, and that's why they called it Lava Jato. Is that actually true?
Um, To be honest, I don't know if that detail is true. I know that the Rio politician that they raid his house and then he has like all this money in the walls. That part was true, but
That's standard. That's standard in
yeah,
LatAm.
that's standard. Yeah, yeah,
Over here we use mortar. They just use paper, different
yeah.
type of paper. Okay,
No, but yeah,
interesting.
it's. I mean, this whole situation with X kind of pointed out like how vulnerable centralized platforms are. Because they also asked iPhone and Android to block the apps and block VPN apps also within their app store. So technically, in the world you only have two app stores, and
Exactly.
then
This is where the real bottleneck is.
that's the real bottleneck. And then the positive is that for Android you can download SDKs like outside of the app store and still install apps. Apple just really fences it off and makes it almost impossible. And then you have some, other operating systems that
Okay.
almost nobody uses. But it did sort of start ringing a bell for me, and kind of like a moment where, yeah, shit, I do need to start using Nostr more. Nostr is basically a non-censorable, decentralized social media platform built on Bitcoin or around Bitcoin. And
Interesting. Never heard of it.
there's multiple apps that you can use to log in, and you basically get a private key, which is your social media profile, and it's just insane. It's just like a Bitcoin wallet where you just log in with that private key in any app, and you get all your tweets and everything back. And it doesn't matter what app you use. So it's really really powerful, I think, and it's becoming more and more popular now with the whole Brazil thing happening. It's still very Bitcoin centric. So the content is a lot around Bitcoin, and because they were just the first ones using it, but it is expanding pretty quickly. And I do think that's I started using it a lot more for my content as well, just because I think it's a very interesting alternative because you can sort of run a relay on your local device, and it's just impossible to censor. So it's very interesting
I like
with everything that's happening now. Yeah.
Yeah, I mentioned to you before, definitely going more down the rabbit hole with regards to there's cryptocurrencies, but then blockchain and those different applications. What about China? So we've got the two, as we mentioned, the two app stores mainly. Well, Apple is definitely a bottleneck. If you don't like anything,
Yeah.
they just, I mean, they're taking 30% clip on all the apps being downloaded. China's coming out with competing devices, as I understand. They're supposed to be pretty good. Are they ever going to see the light of day over in the West, you reckon?
Well,
What
I
about the
think
Southern
most of
Cone? They
the,
might find their way to the BRICS nations.
but I think most of China's devices still run on Android, or no?
I don't know. I don't know.
No, yeah, that's, I still have to do some more digging on that because I haven't used it at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
Yeah.
Lula, he's back. So how many terms can he have? Did he have two, or one doesn't really
Yeah.
count because it got interrupted, and
Uh,
this is like his
no,
swan
no,
song? What's
the
going on?
one that got interrupted was Dilma, so that was like a separate presidency.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, he had two terms, full terms, and then Dilma came in, and afterwards you can just run another term if it's not consecutive. So he could just run again.
So what are the rules here? Can he, as long as he doesn't have two consecutive terms, this is his second term, right? So
No, this is his third term. So
Jesus
no,
Christ,
I mean,
how do you get
yeah,
rid of
no,
this?
he can't run three terms, consecutively.
I
As
see.
long as there's someone in the middle, then he can run again. Yeah. Yeah.
So he
But I
leapfrogs
mean,
over a puppet, and then he's good to go again.
yeah. But I mean, he's old already, right? He's almost 80 years old. He's in the So
Yes.
I think he came back with a vengeance after they tried to jail him, etc. And now he's really, he's angry and he wants to take revenge, basically. And that's a lot of the things that he's doing show that he's kind of spiteful with everything that happened. One of the first things they did was cancel Bolsonaro completely, so he can't run for president anymore.
And is that
And
effective, or are they still trying to?
No, no, that's effective. I mean,
Cool.
they were able to do that, so he cannot run anymore. Um, and yeah, we'll have to see because I'm not sure if he's going to run another term just because of his age. But yeah,
Well,
it's just so difficult because I mean, there's just so many people dependent on government programs now, and he's just expanding and expanding that, and the deficit is growing like crazy, and it's really starting to look a lot like what
Australia.
Argentina went through. Now Australia's not there yet. I mean,
Not
with
yet.
even though not yet, no, it looks bad, but it's still very advanced in comparison. No, but like with Brazil's demographics, they're really going to go basically to shit after 2030. It's already going downhill. So this is all going to be very unsustainable in the future for them.
So they have a demographic problem in their demographic period. I thought they were, reasonable, sort of around the 2.1
No,
births per
yeah,
female.
around 2030, it's really going to go down. And Argentina is a lot more positive, even though in the last 2-3 years there's just been a dip in births. But until 2050, more or less, Argentina, with the current population, doesn't really have any issues in that sense. But Brazil will already start to go down from 2030 onwards.
Oh, surprising. Didn't know that. Is there an
Yeah.
inverse relationship between new births and the flequillo haircut?
Well, it's funny you say that. I actually think it's probably, well, I'm always for um, well, I'm very Dutch in that sense that I was just raised that way. Where
In
I
what way?
think
What do you
people
mean? What
should,
do you mean by that?
well, in terms of maybe too progressive for a good birth rate. Let's sort of say that women should have a choice, etc.
Oh, sure.
But
Yeah, yeah.
at the same time, and I'm not sure if this is one correlation of 1-to-1, but at the same time, when they made it completely legal here, the birth rate really tanked. But it was not like people before didn't have abortions. They always had that, even in private clinics, and it still happened anyway. So, and I don't think people, just because it's legal, they go rush for the doctor and get an abortion. I don't think it works that way. I just think it was a combination, probably with COVID, legalizing that, and just the general tendency of not getting by in very bad economic situation. Although, if you look at other countries that are worse off, in Africa, etc., they don't really care, and they still have 3-4 kids per family, because they're going to sustain the family.
Yeah, Nigeria
You
is
do see
going
that. Yeah, you do see it in lower classes that they have more kids. But yeah, I think we just need to market it a little bit better, and give it some sort of status. Like having kids is a status symbol kind of thing. I mean, we
exactly.
should
Well,
we should make it cool again.
make fertility great again.
Yeah, exactly.
add to the Mara colony. It's interesting. I'm looking at the stats here. 1.6 children per woman in Brazil, 1.88 in Argentina, at least according
Yeah.
to these stats. So that's interesting. Lula, the gray commie. Beware the gray commie. Now,
Yeah.
how did this? Not to talk about him too much, but he was mates with Fidel Castro, right? Like I've seen photos, and I'm not sure how legit they are, but they were.
No, they are legit. Yeah, before he came from the workers' union. Basically, that's his starting point.
Mhm.
And before going full blown into politics, he went to Cuba and basically had a talk there with Fidel Castro, and the idea was for the Foro de Sao Paulo was born there. So the Sao Paulo Forum, which is basically a sort of a leftist think tank, or not really a think tank. It's more like policy in the left direction, which a lot of Latin American countries started to adhere to, and Lula is one of the biggest proponents of that. It was born in Sao Paulo, basically, that whole movement.
And you've got an article on this, I believe, in your Substack.
Yeah. I think I wrote that last month. Yeah, because it's very, very influential. And if you look at all the governments that have passed this century, mainly after, of course, in the 90s, it was all much more liberal in the economic sense of the word in Latin America. Like almost every country had a more open economy, kind of liberal government, more to the right. And then starting the turn of the century, they all shifted left, and they had a really strong influence from this basically Castro current. That's also where Chavez comes from. It's all linked. So I think Cuba has had such a devastating effect on the whole continent. It's crazy.
Crazy. This
How,
little island that
I
grows
know.
sugar and salsa,
Yeah.
and that's about it. And look what it's
But I
done.
mean, yeah, it's just a thing where it's Latin Americans are very emotional, and it's
No, come on. All right.
yeah, and poverty is an emotional thing also, which everybody wants to solve, and you feel bad about it, and socialist things sound nice, and I think that's just one of the reasons why you're kind of a shithead if you don't like that, because you don't care about the poor, and they don't really see the flip side of, but that's not how economics work. And
Exactly.
yeah, because I sincerely think, even though of course there's a lot of corruption in these governments, I do think the initial intention of most of these people is to better the situation for the poor, etc. I think they really believe their own narrative, even though they're sitting in on their private jet, etc. But they still think they're doing the right thing. But yeah, the practice and theory are two different things, and we've seen which way it goes. Now, of course, Brazil can hold out for a lot longer because their economy is just so much bigger,
And more varied
and they're
too. They're not only reliant on the sugar trade.
no, and they have an internal economy that is just huge. It's very US like in that sense, where they can almost not care that much about exports versus Argentina, which only has less people than Spain, so they need to export a lot more. And I think the big problem with Argentina was they kind of adopted a Brazilian model where we're going to produce everything internally. And then at the same time, they started implementing all sorts of export tariffs, etc., which is something that Brazil never did.
Mm.
You know, in practice, Brazil was a lot freer economically than Argentina because Argentina started, you know, planting all these trade barriers basically for their own population to sort of protect their internal market. Now, Brazil also had protections in terms of, you know, import tariffs. That is kind of universal in the whole Mercosur, so the union of these, the trade union between these South American countries, especially for the full members. They have to sort of abide with a lot of tariffs that are equal. There's also associate members. So the full members are now Bolivia, Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay. And then the rest of the continent, basically all countries, are associate members, which means that they can also trade with the other countries, but they can also set their own trade agreements with other countries outside of the bloc. So basically, they have the best of both worlds because they can set their own trade agreements with other countries like China, and they have the freedom of movement of the full members. So they can also get residency in any other country. You know, if you look at it like that, it's way better for Argentina to be an associate member than a founding member, basically,
Yeah.
because you know Argentina cannot negotiate any trade agreement with China without consulting the other four countries first. You know, they need to agree on that,
Like a
which
mini
is
EU.
very, yeah, it's like a mini EU, and it's not beneficial for the smaller countries. And you know, the big beneficiary of this closed system is Brazil because you know they're the biggest, and they're just able to dump all their merchandise on the other countries, and they have a big internal economy, of course. So yeah, it's. I wrote another article about that last week about how the Mercosur works and kind of like how it evolved over time.
The
So yeah,
Mercosur maze, listeners,
yeah,
make sure you check out the link that I'll leave below to these articles, all freely accessible. It's crazy. I had an irresponsible exposure to Brazil, mainly via Petrobras, but through other companies as well,
yeah,
Stonecone and what have you, in 2022, 2023. And it treated me very
yeah,
well. And now I have about 3% of my portfolio exposed to Brazil because it just doesn't give
yeah.
me the warm and fuzzies.
Well, yeah, I had the same thing. I really juiced the dividends that it was giving because it was about 20% in dollar terms, and you know the stock also kept going up nicely. And then you know when Lula came in, and I think when did I sell my last shares? I think it was um, earlier this year at the end of last year. And it was sort of the moment when I saw that Lula was starting to appoint politicians or friends in Petrobras. And that was sort of the red flag of the whole Lava Jato is starting again. And they even annulled a few laws that prohibited them from appointing politicians in key positions in Petrobras because of the whole corruption scandal. And that was sort of like, yeah, they're just going to continue with the same shit. So I decided to sell everything and, you know, move on.
Yeah, disappointing. And disappointing.
Yeah.
A similar deal to Colombia. I had a very large exposure in Colombia. It's been reduced to maybe 1 or 2% now, thanks to the clown that's running that base.
Yeah, I do have some exposure to Ecopetrol still because I do think that's salvageable. I don't think he will renew a term, and I think they're going to flip the other way. Like Colombia is just way more, you know, center right versus Brazil. Brazil is just already way too left wing. You know, and I think even if Lula leaves now, they're probably going to vote a successor from his party.
Interesting and, in my view, unfortunate. Brazil taking a few L's. Let's talk about a guy who just seems to be hitting nothing but W's. Our friend Javier Milei. I mean, last time you and I spoke, he had just kind of come into office. He was dealing with all these bombs that were left by the previous administrations. What are the main points as we look out where, nearly 10 months into his first term? What are the key things that have happened, and what are you noticing on the ground in terms of the morale in general amongst the people of Argentina?
Yeah, I think the deregulation items. I mean, they even started a Ministry of Deregulation with Minister Sturzenegger. I think that element is one of the most important elements that his government has implemented so far. It's basically, cutting a bunch of bullshit red tape that is very bureaucratic here on, for businesses, etc. He made it, also easier to hire people, fire people. The whole investment scheme where big companies with at least 200 million to invest to get tax cuts, and they have a fixed investment scheme that will be valid for 30 years, because otherwise, none of these companies want to invest because it's so volatile and things could change with the next admin. So basically, they took care of, okay, let's give them some clear rules that will be valid with this investment they're making. And capital is starting to slowly flow in. It's still at very low levels even if you compare it to the previous administration in terms of the percentage of GDP. Investment levels are still low, so it's going to be quite a challenge to face all the maturities next year if this stays this way. But we're already seeing an inflection point of salaries increasing in real dollar terms, and the economy also picking up after the big dip that basically, we're still in a recession, I think, and we're slowly creeping out of it. I think the next couple of months are going to be key, and seeing if he can lift the foreign exchange restrictions and having a free floating peso rate. If he's able to do that without getting a run on the dollar and like completely demolishing the peso, because that's of course the danger there, and that's why they didn't do it yet. But the longer you wait, the harder the deval is going to be. So I do think they need to do this before the midterms next October in 2025.
You wrote a great
And
article on the 25 midterm. The original plan was to eliminate the CEPO, I believe, this year, and then they're postponing it till Q1 next year. And what's the maturity wall looking like at the moment? And can he go to the IMF with the improved balance sheet on the fiscal side of things and say, hey, we actually have some reserves now. Let's talk about restructuring these most imminent maturities. Or is the evil IMF not gonna play ball?
Well, the evil IMF is being, the evil IMF. It always is. They say, "Oh wow, your results are way better than we expected, but we're not going to give you money because
oh my God, that makes me so angry." Well, you see,
but
the Musk administration goes to them and go, "How many billions?"
Yeah, exactly.
They complied with none of the requisites.
Nothing.
None. Zero.
Nothing.
Zero.
Yeah.
They said, "Here, here's however many billions."
Isn't another 10 billion?
Jesus.
Yeah, no, that's the problem. But that's why, I think it's only better if Argentina is able to do it without IMF money, because it's just a perpetual debt loop that they keep countries in. And basically, if it's a really bad administration, is throw money in it and keep it that way. And if it's if you see that it's going the right direction, it's sort of like they get scared. It's like, oh shit, they might crawl out of this, and it's not something they want to see.
No, it's very telling.
Yeah.
It's very, very telling. So when's the next biggest maturity due, and how much Argentina have in their reserves?
Well, I'm not sure about the months, but I have in one of those articles, I do have the full outlook for 2025.
4.6 billion this year. We're halfway through, more than halfway through.
Yeah.
2025 is 18 billion.
Yeah.
Monthly payment profile. So obviously that's quite a large jump.
Yeah. Yeah, so we'll have to see how that goes, because right now, with the Blanqueo, so that's basically the tax amnesty, there is a lot of dollar deposits coming into the banks right now of people basically saying, look, I had all this money under my mattress, and now laundering it, and here it is, and I'm not going to
That's a
pay any
huge
tax
vote
on
of
it.
confidence. When you think about what happened
Yeah,
in 2001, people actually depositing into Argentinian
yeah,
banks.
no, it's crazy, yeah, and so far it's almost already like $1 billion that's been deposited, and it's continuing. So yeah, we'll see how much that will be in total. It's a good thing to have that as a buffer because, of course, they're not central bank reserves, they're private deposits, but still, it does give a good buffer for, if there is a run on the dollar, if they take off the FX restrictions, because at least then there's enough dollars in the system. So um, that's kind of the thinking there. Because in terms of reserves, they have unwound like the whole negative liquid reserve situation, but it's still around zero. So it was like minus 15 or something, but they're still wiggling around, one in the plus, minus one, zero. So it's not really going up anymore. During the first half of the year, it was very quickly that they came to, almost a positive balance. But now we already had most of the agro exports, etc., are done. So that money is not flowing in anymore. But they get the tariffs for in the central bank, which is almost 10% more or less. And of course, we have the economic slowdown, which means there's less tax revenue coming in. So now you have the Blanqueo, which is like additional money coming in, but also the
So talk to me,
percentages that you,
explain the Blanqueo for people, because if you live in like a functioning banking system, let's say, this is pretty
yeah,
foreign to you. So what's
yeah,
the idea behind Blanqueo?
yeah. So Blanqueo is basically literally laundering in Spanish, and it's a tax amnesty for money that is off the books that people have outside of the banking system, etc. And it can be offshore in the US or in cash dollars, here, or in real estate they didn't declare, crypto they didn't declare. Basically, anything you didn't declare, you can declare it, and uh, it
Like,
has to be in a special bank account, though. But from that bank account now, they created debit cards where you can use that money in the economy. So you don't have to leave it there, because that was the initial thought, was leaving it there for a year at least, or until December 2025. You could invest it in stocks and bonds, but nothing else, or you could buy a house with it or something. But for the rest, it had to be there. But now they're actually thinking about, no, it would be good to have that money circulating in the economy. So they already made the adjustments for that. And yeah, it's huge here in Argentina. I think half of the economy runs in the shadows, and the estimates are that there's around $400 billion off the books, which means we're talking about, more than 10 central banks are outside of the banking system. so so that's the big middle figure of the Argentines saying, like, all fine and well with all your tariffs and taxes, but I'm not paying them. So
yeah, I love it. No, well, this is a good idea. I mean, the Blanqueo encourages people
yeah,
then to come back into the monetary system,
yeah.
and yeah,
Yeah, in
that's a
terms of
good.
good ideas, personally, I do think it's an insane vote of confidence, because every government does a Blanqueo. It's very normal here, and
Yeah, they also do a three
uh,
for one deval overnight in 2001. So,
yeah, and well, I mean, they do keep it in dollars, so that deval like that, of course, it could always happen, but I just hope it won't.
okay, so let's talk
But
about
Macri,
the
yeah,
risk of the
Macri did
deval.
one. Yeah, the risk of the deval, basically the risk is, if there's, if people start pulling all the dollars out of the system and there's just not enough to cover the deposits,
Okay,
that's the risk.
okay.
The other risk is, entering a Blanqueo. I know a lot of people that did that with Macri, because Macri also in 2017, I believe it was, he did a tax amnesty, and a lot of people entered that. And the thing is, once you adhere to that, then you cannot enter a future Blanqueo, and you have a target on your back from the AFIP, the local IRS, basically you're a known tax evader, and a lot of these people that entered that one, they got audited every single year afterwards because it was sort of like, oh yeah, you must have something you didn't declare.
Exactly. Yeah. You put the
So
hand up for me to come knocking.
exactly. So also, the Milei government already said yes, and afterwards we're going to be way more scrutinizing a lot more if you didn't declare it or didn't enter the Blanqueo. But they all say that as well. So yeah, I'm kind of hesitant about entering a Blanqueo because I do think it makes you more of a target, and especially if let's suppose that Milei doesn't win another term and the Kirchners come back, and that's what happened in 2019. They had this nice little list of all these people under Macri who said that they had money offshore, so not declared. So yeah,
Bad
that was
idea.
just party time.
Oof, the pain.
Yeah.
Well, we look at today. Dollar blue is at 12.60, so not much higher than when I was over there in April.
No, it's
And
insane because you still have 4% inflation month over month. So it did drop a lot from 25 when he started to 4,
amazing.
but 4 is still very high for normal countries.
Mostly. Yeah, exactly.
It does in dollar terms. Argentina just I think at least doubled, but it was ridiculously cheap, and it's getting more closer to the mean now. But some items, like supermarket items, etc., are just like ridiculously expensive compared to Europe or the US. Except for meat and fresh food, etc., is usually not more expensive, but especially industrialized, packaged food, etc., tends to be more expensive.
Especially if it's imported. The Twitter brethren will remember I put a picture of Buddy.
Oh, they took off the import tariffs for that.
They have
So
done. Yeah.
yeah, they have done that, and now they're starting to get a lot more food from Europe, etc., at normal prices. So
Oh,
that's going to be interesting. What local producers are going to do with that? They might get priced out of the market.
well, it'll be interesting to see. But I thought it was insane to pay the equivalent of $10 US for a half-kilo packet of pasta. But anyway, goodness gracious. So here's a thought. Jerome Powell basically told us he's going to be cutting
Yeah,
next Fed announcement, and so
that's mid-September, right?
yes, it is. So it's
Yeah.
coming up, and so then we think, okay, well, all else being equal, the dollar, the DXY should fall a little bit, dollar weakening against our other currencies. How much is the Fed policy going to impact Milei's ability to prevent that run on the dollar and maintain a relatively stable peso until he can clean up a little bit more and eventually say goodbye to the cepo?
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's going to impact the rate that much, to be honest. Yeah, it's just a lot more local dynamic because right now with the with the higher rates, technically, we should already have a run on the dollar, but at the same time, because you have the recession, people are needing to cash in their dollars to pay for their daily peso expenses.
Yeah.
So there's just a lot. Yeah, there's just a lot less liquidity in the total system, and also M2 slowed down a lot, etc. So there's just a lot less pesos in the system, and they're really doing that on purpose. They're sort of like vacuum cleaning pesos out of the whole society, and that's why everything is, the peso is appreciating. But it also means that things are becoming a lot more expensive in dollar terms.
Yeah, and this is kind of what I've been playing for a liquidity crunch in the day-to-day expenses before I start to make a move in that local market. When you and I first started chatting, that was at the beginning of that rate hiking cycle, and that was when if you had dollars, I mean, this was just like one of the greatest times, one of the greatest 12-month windows of all time because you were getting paid on these dollars, and all the other foreign currencies, unfortunately, were getting absolutely smacked.
Yeah.
And so we'll see. Real estate.
Yes. Well,
Interesting.
they talking about that period. I think I made my biggest investments in real estate during Massa. So I mean, talking about confidence in the country, it was almost not even sure that Milei would even win more than 20%. And I thought, the prices are so low, they're just going to have to go up no matter, even if Massa wins, it's just going to have to go up. So I think I bought in June, July. No, I actually bought in February 2023, and then another one in around July-ish. And that was, July, August, September. That was kind of really the bottom of real estate prices. And in some neighborhoods like Recoleta and Palermo, prices have already gone up 20% from then to now. And those are not listing prices, but real closing prices.
Okay.
So it really started to pick up, and that also, is in tandem with credit availability. So I mean, it's still negligible, the amount of credit. I think there's not even 100 mortgages coming out month over month. So it's you can't really say that it's having an impact. But normally for Buenos Aires, the city, with CEPO, so with the FX restrictions, normally the max would be to have 3,500 to 4,000 operations, sales, basically, and we're already at 6,000. So and that's with all the restrictions in place, but it is still. So if we take those off,
big increase in turnover.
Yeah. So I do think there's a lot less on the market right now, and there's a lot of demand. So you can also see the whole supply is just being eaten up slowly month over month. It's just there's not going to be enough buildings in the next couple of years if this continues.
And that's crazy, because if anyone who has been recently to Buenos Aires, there's a ton of construction activity happening, and you're involved.
Yeah.
And we've had the repealing of the Ley de los Alquileres, which has opened up more, I guess, rental supply for locals.
Mm-hmm.
How is it possible when you've got what I perceive to be a lot of vacancy? How is it possible that now you're looking at a supply crunch?
Yeah, well, the supply crunch is not so much in rentals, because those are actually, there's an oversupply now for long-term and short-term rentals.
Okay, yeah.
And that was basically because the restrictions were taken off, and now everybody can just determine their own terms. And lots more supply on the market, and prices have gone down actually for both for short-term rentals and for long-term rentals as well. So you can actually find for long-term rentals, you can actually find a really nice, 2-bedroom apartment for $450, $500 a month. Of course, you need to be resident for that. If you rent on the short-term market, it's going to be more expensive, but it's also not crazy. I mean, the overnight rates in a studio are now $20, $25 a night, so it's nothing crazy compared to what it used to be when the restrictions were still there. You could easily pay 40, 50. So that has really gone down. Yeah.
Interesting, super interesting. How common is it if you're not a resident to do the old Facebook DM, say, yeah, I got a room, I'll pay you cash monthly, 12 months? Can that happen?
So I've done that before I had official residency, and I just paid the whole year up front. So you can usually do that with if you pay a couple months up front. Sometimes if the owner is just a nice guy, you can come to an agreement, you can pay it month over month. But usually they will want some extra guarantees that you will actually be there all those months, and not you're serious, and then you just have to pay up front. But the price difference is definitely worth it. So yeah.
Interesting. There we go. Anything regional taking the Mara's fancy, or you're pretty happy to stick to Buenos Aires?
Well, yeah, I am looking a little bit into to rural as well. and that's just so
Now
much
we're
cheaper
talking.
compared to Buenos Aires. No, but for now, I'm just way too overinvested in real estate, so I'm not planning on investing anymore. I think I'm good after this, and there's still 3 units that are being built right now. So I'm just gonna have to wait until they're finished, and then start. Well, one is going to be for my family, so I'm going to live there, and then the other ones I'm going to juice them for rents, basically.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Sounds interesting. Sounds like Mrs. Mara has put the foot down and said no more development, at least for now.
Oh, I've actually done that because it's hard to get your liquidity is just so much harder, and I do like the whole electronic payments, Bitcoin, etc. The fact that you can just move money around so quickly, I just love that kind of freedom, and it's just a lot harder to do with real estate.
Yes, it is. Yeah, and there are so many
Yeah,
headaches. It's a massive pain in the ass. That's interesting
yeah.
you touched on, and it's kind of a segue into crypto, which I'm a little bit old fashioned, didn't understand it very much. But most recently, I saw how much it really, there was a use case. I was seeing it all the time around me. And this is more on a commercial project I've been looking into, but you can have tenants paying you in crypto in various forms, USDT.
Mhm.
Are you involved in any of that sort of stuff where you get paid USDT and then you find it reasonably easy to transfer it into fiat currency as you need to? What are your thoughts on that? You're more involved in
Yeah,
that.
so I that's basically my go-to if whenever I need dollars here or pesos, I just transfer a USDT to a Cueva. Um, And instead of holding treasuries, I actually hold some stable coins in and get some yield on that as well in on decentralized platforms. And the yield is almost the same as treasuries, or a little bit higher because of course you have a little bit more risk there because of protocols, etc.
Now,
And I
back up just one
basically
second. So are you
yeah.
getting paid on an exchange here, or how is this working? I don't understand.
So you can either do it on an exchange, but of course that's centralized. So the exchange shuts down, you lose your coins, etc. So I'm also not a big fan of USDT, particularly, but because so many people use it anyways, and that basically gives it value. But my problem with USDT is that the proof of reserves is just not really there for me. And that's the big doubt there is like who says that they can are not just issuing things into space without
Back
backing
in.
by bonds or whatever. So that's basically the problem with USDT. USDC is a regulated circle, etc. But the problem there is just it's less accepted. Especially in the third world, everybody uses USDT because it's not regulated that much. So they basically prefer that. So yeah, I just have my cash position is in stable coins, and for liquidity whenever I need it, I just cash it out a little bit, send to the Cueva, and get my pesos here or dollars, whatever I need. Um, so yeah, I use it for that basically, and it's a pretty good use case. I way prefer that versus what I used to do was, and that's still how a lot of this market operates, is sending wire transfers to third-party bank account who needs the money offshore. They give you the dollars here in cash. The thing is, that triangulation at a certain point, if that gets flagged, you lose your bank account, etc. It's just a big risk. So having this sort of in crypto keeps it, outside of TradFi, and just less risky in terms of, what if you send money to the wrong account or whatever, or somebody that got flagged for whatever. That's just a way bigger risk in the traditional finance system.
Interesting. Okay. Do you have a favorite wallet or group of wallets that you like to use?
Um, so let's see. Um, Well, yeah, I use a couple of different wallets for Bitcoin mainly. I have of course, a Ledger that I use for cold storage. Then I let's see what else you have. use some of these multi-coin wallets as well for stables, etc., and have everything in one place. But those are more hot wallets, so it's for lower amounts. Things like Exodus or Coinomi is another one. Yeah, but there's so much to choose from. It's really, and I tend to go for the projects that have been out there for forever, and sort of have a proven track record instead of going for the latest and greatest just because of risk of hacking and whatever. That's one of the things that especially if you're just starting out, you just make sure that you're always on an official website or whatever. Clicking on the wrong link can be very detrimental.
Yeah.
And it's crazy
How do we know
because
that the website we're looking at is legit, an official website?
yeah, no, and there's even scammers who buy a similar domain with just one letter difference, and sometimes you hardly even see it.
Yeah.
And they start advertising in Google, and it takes Google quite a while before they take ads like that down. So a lot of people get scammed before they actually take it down. So that's why if you Google, preferably not click on an ad because it could be a scam website, and some are just like perfect copies of the real thing, and you really have to look at the URL very closely to notice. It's very well done. Yeah.
Goodness, what a trap. We're coming up on the hour. Let's wrap it up with what are the most useful apps that the Mari uses every day? What are your top 3, maybe 5 go-to apps that make your life easier? You can't live without.
Well, I think if you see my Twitter, that's probably number one. But it's all shit posting. So, yeah, I wouldn't say I'm a lot more productive because of Twitter, but that's where I get my news basically, and I post a lot, and I get a lot of news from the government. It is really a great resource in that sense. So I do get a lot of ideas also for articles, etc. And then the other apps what I use, I have another app which I like a lot for my investments, which is Delta. And the nice thing with Delta is that they have everything from gold to bonds, stocks, crypto. You can basically create a whole portfolio with everything in it, and it tracks it real time. And you can even say monitor this wallet, which is mine, and it will track every movement and keep your portfolio up to date based on what happened in that wallet. So there's just a lot of it's kind of like a holistic way of looking at your whole portfolio. And it for real estate, I just add like a cash position which more or less resembles the worth of that property, and that way you can really see, and you can create different portfolios and then still get the total at the top. So you can that's one that I use on a daily basis. And then what else? There's a couple of marketing apps that I use for my business. And let's see. Yeah, for the rest, it's I use Substack quite a bit to read on my phone. I would say those are the main ones that I use. I've actually tried not to be on my phone during the day because otherwise my productivity just goes out the window.
I'm the same.
So yeah.
I don't think it's great for my mental health either. So I'm hot and cold posting because it's not really a big thing anyway. It's not a big part of my income stream, and I don't know. Sometimes sometimes you look through the news feed, and it takes a while to find some good news stories. Well, your account's always got some funny ones on there.
Yeah, I try to use the For Me tab on X because that always gives me like new things that I would otherwise not see. And then if it's interesting, I can share it. Yeah.
Very interesting. All right, sir. Anything else you have on your mind that you'd like to comment and leave us with your wisdom?
well, not wisdom, but I will, the eternal duality of Argentina. I am seriously, struggling with that sometimes, even now, because I'm super bullish, and at the same time, I just don't know what's going to happen with the, lifting the FX restrictions, when that's going to happen, if something, is going to come crashing down, when that happens. There's just so many incognitos there.
You touched on
And it,
something just so you've got to experience this to I know exactly what you're talking about. It's this visceral feeling.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's just very tough. And I also think that a lot of people, sense this, and that's also why it's taking a bit longer for people to start investing, etc. Everybody's
100%.
kind of like, waiting it out, seeing what happens. I think the midterms next year is also going to be a very crucial moment. If they win a lot of seats, I think then it will be sort of a trigger for people to see, like, okay, yeah, this is sort of like a changing sentiment that is not just a 1 day thing. And it looks like it's here to stay, and it's going to be a political force to reckon with, besides just this government.
Yeah, exactly. That's the key point because I've been trying to present the bull case to Argentinians close to me, and they think I'm crazy, and they think, the counter argument would be okay, but when the next change of government does occur, what happens to all this progress if the Peronitas were to come back into play? So, how much of what the current administration is doing is, let's call it, socialist proof into the future to make it safe for long-term investing?
Yeah, I think, well, those big 200 million minimum investments, those are, I think, safe and foolproof beyond this government for the next 30 years. And then I think the more rigorous law changes that they push through with the omnibus bill, I think those will also most likely stick. But then there's a lot of regulation, that they're deregulating, and I just think that as long as they really clean house, so for example, they're closing down a lot of car registries, etc. As long as they are able to sell those properties and really get rid of it instead of like having it vacant or whatever, I think that will be it will be a lot harder to rebuild that whole infernal government structure again, for in a short time. But at the same time, there's a lot of things that, let's say, Kicillof would win in 2027, who's now the governor of the province of Buenos Aires, very close to Cristina Kirchner, etc. And he's like a super Marxist. So, let's say he wins in 2027. He, with a few strokes of the pen, he could just recreate, like, 8 ministries or whatever, and start over again, try to recreate the beast, basically.
That's the scary part. That's the scary.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Be fascinating to watch it all unfold. Thank you very much for listening, guys. Check out the Bowtied Mara's Substack in the description, and we'll be back at you with another episode of the Maverick Life podcast. Take care.